Anytime Muslims want to resist Zionism, Western imperialism, European imperialism, the Wahhabis are there to declare that group, that resistance group, to be non-Muslim, literally writing billion-dollar checks, trillion-dollar checks for Donald Trump, gifting him, giving him gifts as he commits like a genocide, as he participates in the genocide of your Muslim brothers. This is like a level of betrayal that we see over and over and over again. Now they're focusing on Shia because of the Iran issue, but their main problem has always been with other Sunnis. Any Muslim who doesn't support Iran and doesn't want Iran to come out on top, or is neutral, like they're traitors basically.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode on TMJ's Political Current podcast. The ongoing US-Israeli war on Iran has resurfaced an important question many have been asking with Israel's war on Gaza as well, and that is why so many Muslim nations in the region, especially Persian Gulf countries, are not just complicit, but actively aiding the US and Israel in their unchecked aggression across the region. This comes as Iran has actually been targeting several of these countries, specifically the US military and security assets, which to many people's surprise is actually all over the place in these countries. Now, joining me today to help explain why that is, along with a deep dive on Wahhabism and why that has everything to do with what we're seeing as well, is Daniel Haqiqatjou, an American Muslim commentator, writer, and lecturer on Islam and modernity, who's also had several analyses on Western dominance in the region and why the absence of Muslim unity is serving US-Israeli interests more than any of us think. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us on TMJ News. It's wonderful to have you on. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And I actually want to start with an angle to the whole ongoing war dialogue that's happening that's often less explored, I find. And I think this specific angle is largely missing. I know it's something that you have actually talked about, in great length on your own YouTube channel and your interviews. But I would say in the past 2 years, especially since October 7th, with the continued Gaza genocide, global populations, I would say, have awakened to the reality of kind of the US-Israeli Western alliance that is responsible for much of the killing and destruction that's happening in the region. But less discussed is the role of Muslim countries in the same region that have, we could say, enabled exactly what we're seeing happen. Indirectly with Palestine, which we saw, and now actively, actually with Iran, with, US bases in many of these countries being very directly used to target Iran. And I would say, if these countries really did with Palestine stand up and reject the US and Israel's ability to have unquestioned kind of dominance in the region using their countries in many examples, we would have not seen this level of destruction, definitely not with Palestine, because there were only a handful of countries that were actually, aside from just, thoughts and prayers offering support for Palestine, but also with Iran now, So what I want to ask you is, you've really discussed how Israel's long-term strategy in the region is to weaken their Muslim neighbors, not just by creating constant conflict between Muslims and Christians, but also sectarian strife between Sunnis and Shias, which, as you've mentioned, they have actually directly funded, which I would love to get into. But do you think that's why we are here?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Yeah, I think that the colonial pattern has been since the beginning, in the 18th century, late 18th century, 19th century, has been to pit Muslims against each other, to be able to invade and take over countries or regions like Algeria, Egypt and Northern Africa, the subcontinent, Southeast Asia, like in Indonesia, by identifying traitors, basically, Muslims who are willing to collaborate with the foreign power that wants to establish itself, collaborating with those kinds of traitors who are willing to throw their fellow Muslims or their fellow countrymen under the bus and use a kind of divide and conquer strategy. This has been the consistent pattern that we see historically, and unfortunately, it's not specific country necessarily that really does this more than others. But it's something that we find within the Muslim world historically, and Israel in the current period has really perfected this strategy because they recognize that Muslims sometimes have difficulty looking past differences. It doesn't have to be Sunni Shia sectarian differences. It can also be nationalism. It can be ethnocentrism, racism, bigotry. They try to divide on the basis of all of these lines. And this is explicitly spelled out in Israeli strategy. It's known as the Yanon Plan that was developed in 1980 by Oded Yanon. He's a Israeli, about how Israel can gain security in the Middle East. And the plan was to exacerbate conflict in throughout the Muslim world, throughout these neighboring regions of Israel in the Middle East, but even beyond that, in Africa and elsewhere, to get, for example, the Kurds fighting the Arabs, fighting the Persians, fighting the Turks, get Sunni and Shia, obviously, but even within Sunnis, create conflict between the traditionalists versus the fundamentalists, Salafi, Sufi, Deobandi, whatever, create as much of this conflict. And they do this through deception. They do this in a variety of ways. But one of the most pernicious ways, especially now in the age of social media, is to have like Unit 8200, which is one of the intelligence units of the Mossad, to go online and pose as Muslims. And it's someone who is just with a anonymous account saying, "Oh, I'm a Shi'i and I curse, the Sahaba," and using the most vile language to curse like revered Sunni figures, and vice versa. Someone posing as a Sunni and starting to say, all the Shia are kuffar, they're all disbelievers, they all deserve to die. I hope we genocide them. And this is the deliberate strategy that is used by Israel in this for the past 40 years, especially, but now in the social media age has come to a peak of fomenting nonstop conflict, civil war, animosity, and even on the level of nations. Like there were reports initially, Tucker Carlson actually reported this, that drone strikes against some of the oil infrastructure earlier, like a couple of weeks ago, that were initially blamed on Iran. Look, Iran is attacking the Gulf oil infrastructure. They're really escalating because prior to that, they had only been striking military bases, US military bases. Now they're actually targeting the oil infrastructure. This is a huge escalation. And Tucker Carlson basically revealed from his sources that this was actually Mossad. Mossad agents had been captured in some of these Gulf countries attempting to sabotage, like actually releasing drones to do these attacks so that it would be blamed on Iran. So the Gulf countries would attack Iran, or would believe that Iran was escalating and doing this kind of aggression so that they would retaliate. So this kind of false flag attacks, online deception, fomenting sectarianism and hatred with all of these countries, creating civil war within the Muslim world. This is one of the most potent strategies that Israel has used. And it's not, this kind of strategy is not originating with Zionism. It predates Zionism because, again, in the 19th century, this is what the British and the French utilized against the Muslims. They utilized it against the Ottomans. They utilized it heavily in World War I and thereafter, and the Wahhabis, actually. And this is a history that's not really well known, but it's
Yeah.
paradigmatic of the overall strategy. I'm sorry, I'm talking for a long time, but it's paradigmatic of the strategy of divide and conquer that has been used consistently over and over and over again. Even the British and the French drawing the lines, like the Sykes-Picot Agreement, drawing the lines of the national boundaries of the modern states that we have when they broke up the Ottoman Empire and took all this territory, the Middle Eastern territories, from them. That this is based on a divide and conquer. Like, how do we draw the lines in a way so that we limit the size of these populations, the Muslim populations, keep them, let's invoke or promote nationalism so they won't unite together and fight back for whatever we want to do, what are all the resources that we want to take, because this is at the time that oil is being discovered. You have combustion engine, you need, like, the engine of war is run by oil at this
Mhm.
time, like this is just beginning.
Yeah.
And you have, this all this wealth. So how do we keep that and take that away from Muslims?
Absolutely. And this element of, superiority that were mentioning as you were discussing that, that's also, very key to Wahhabism. And that's the conversation I want to get into now is this Wahhabism in specific. We know how Wahhabi networks, they have, indirectly, you could even say directly, served US and Israeli interests and their strategic goals actually by fragmenting Muslim unity in this way. And part of it, in fact, includes this idea that we are superior. It involves lots of, Saudis cracking down on, religious minorities, Shias being one of them, not even just within Saudi Arabia, but really painting those who don't share that ideology as outsiders and not even Muslims, which is rhetoric that we've seen come out from Wahhabi ideology in specific. But many people are not, I guess, it's difficult for them to grasp why exactly Wahhabism in specific has been so instrumental in facilitating all of this. So can you help kind of bringing in not just history, but the modern day applications of Wahhabism within this larger regional, game, if you will, and how and what specific, consequences it's had, not just for Muslim unity, but furthering US Israeli interests, especially at this time when we're seeing a lot of it really come to, fruition.
Sure, I can give you a history of this. And what we see, Wahhabism began with Ibn Abdul Wahhab. That's who Wahhabism is named after. And people now consider Wahhabi as a pejorative. But historically, actually, the Wahhabis, they called themselves Wahhabis. They called themselves the Wahhabiyun. They were proud to be called Wahhabis. That changed in the 20th century for reasons that we'll discuss. But the thing about Ibn Abdul Wahhab is that he claimed that he was the only one to understand La ilaha illallah, meaning he's the only one to have understood properly, truly, the meaning of monotheism. And he said this explicitly, that none of my teachers knew it. I'm the one who has actually understood what La ilaha illallah, monotheism, tawheed actually means. And on the basis of this, he did mass takfir. He declared that all these regions of Muslims, they're actually not Muslim. They think that they're Muslim, but they're not actually Muslim because they haven't understood La ilaha illallah as it should be understood, as he claimed it should be understood. So he takfired, first of all, his own region, the Muslims of his region, which is Najd, which is this kind of eastern, central, southern part of current day Saudi Arabia, Riyadh, centered around Riyadh. He first declared them all to be disbelievers, and him and his followers began attacking this Najd region, attacking the different tribes, and he got this support for this. He was patronized by an opportunistic individual, Ibn Saud. Okay, where the Saudi dynasty is originating with Ibn Saud, and this is in the 18th century. And Ibn Saud found this opportunity to get a religious ideologue to support him being a warlord, basically being a tribal warlord and dominating, taking land, taking wealth, and expanding his control and his power. And he had aims to take over the entirety of the Arabian Peninsula. And Ibn Abdul Wahhab, like this psycho, is giving him the religious justification, because in Islam, it's not allowed for you to declare jihad against fellow Muslims and to go attack them, kill them, take their wealth. This is something that is completely prohibited to do against other Muslims. But if you declare that, oh, these other Muslims, they're not actually Muslim, they're actually mushriks, they're actually polytheists, then you can make an argument that's justified to attack them and to kill them or whatever. And so this is what Ibn Abdul Wahhab provided Ibn Saud. So they created a partnership. Ibn Saud provides the weapons, the money. He provides, the support for Ibn Abdul Wahhab. And Ibn Abdul Wahhab provides the religious justification and urges his followers to support Ibn Saud for this political program, to basically rape and pillage and plunder throughout the Arabian Peninsula. And they waged this terror campaign, growing from Najd, taking territory. And eventually they reached Western Arabia. They reached the Hijaz. They siege Ta'if. They siege Mecca. They siege Medina. Literally, when you siege these cities, like, you're creating this boycott, you're a blockade, the kind of blockade that Israel uses against Muslims, against Gaza, for example. They establish a blockade to starve the people to death until they have no choice but to surrender. And that's what they did to Mecca. That's what they did to Medina. And they actually entered these cities, and they forced the scholars, like the religious authorities, representing the traditional Sunni schools, like the Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali, Hanafi, which were represented, they were under the Ottoman Empire at that time, representing those four schools. They forced them by threat of death to sign statements that we're actually disbelievers, and only now we enter Islam, the Islam as defined, as taught by Ibn Abdul Wahhab. And that document still exists. That's on the historical record. And the Wahhabis, in their history books, they tout this. They boast about it, that we, look at how we were able to conquer the disbelievers, the mushrikeen. So this is what makes Wahhabism so dangerous. So this kind of campaign, that they waged terror campaign against the Ottomans. They took over the Arabian Peninsula. They were even sieging and raiding in Shem, in the Levant, modern day Syria, Jordan, Palestine. They're also attacking Iraq, and they committed a massacre of 4,000 Shia Muslims in Karbala, actually. And they're proud of this. They're boasting because they think that, this is something positive that they're doing, that they're spreading Islam in lands that are Muslim. They have masajid, they have imams, they have prayer, they have entire Islamic governance under the Ottoman Empire. So this is the terror campaign. It goes into the early 19th century. 1804 is when they take over Mecca, and that lasts a couple of decades, but the Ottomans are able to regain control in the 19th century. But then this ideology rears its ugly head again in the 20th century, in the early 1900s. Leading up to World War I, as I mentioned previously. And Abdul Aziz ibn Saud, who's a descendant of the original Ibn Saud, he again has these plans to reconquer the Arabian Peninsula, and he's able to do this with the help of the British. So Wahhabism has this very ugly history. And by the way, Abdul Aziz ibn Saud realized that he has a bad reputation. Wahhabism has a terrible reputation because at that time, news had spread of what Wahhabis do, that they pillage and plunder and rape. So they had been identified as the Khawarij, as Kharijites. And this is one of the first, if not the first, deviant groups in the history of Islam, starting with the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who warned about these types of people, the Khawarij, who declare, their defining feature is that they declare illegitimately other Muslims to be kafir, to be disbelievers, and then wage jihad to kill them. They make their blood halal. This is their defining feature, and this is the defining feature of Wahhabis. And that's why Sunni scholars throughout this period, at the early 19th century and then later, declared the Wahhabis to be Khawarij, to be Kharijites, to be this deviant group. And that was the reputation of Wahhabis. And then you have the ideological Wahhabis today, which still are continuing takfir, still are continuing this attack on Muslims, still justifying US and Israeli invasion. And those people have to be shunned. They have to be recognized that they're deviants. You have to recognize that they're enemies to the Muslims, to the Ummah, because they are enabling the enemies of Islam, who are literally engaged in a genocide as we speak in Palestine. They're helping them. They're helping them and providing ideological cover for them. So this is treachery. This is betrayal. This is the worst kind of betrayal possible. And it is the Wahhabis who are the flag bearers of this. And I don't want to say that it's just the Wahhabis. You have sectarianism on both sides. Even on the Shia side, even on the Sunni side, you have sectarian forces. And so they should be blamed as well. The difference is, however, with Wahhabis, is that it's funded with billions of dollars of petrodollars that have been used to spread this ideology and this doctrine, and they revere Ibn Abdul Wahhab to such an extent. Like there's a psyop basically to present Ibn Abdul Wahhab as this pious reformer revivalist. And even I fell for that.
Mhm.
Even I fell for that. And but the history is actually quite grim and dark.
And how would you say that has kind of developed and evolved into, the modern, I guess, kind of evolution of Wahhabism? Because, what you're mentioning and what caught my ears when you mentioned it is this idea that Wahhabis, many of them, really do believe that, for example, religious minorities, not just even Shias, because I know Shias, they definitely don't consider Muslim, but even Sunnis. I've seen clips of where even with Palestinians, despite the fact that I would say an overwhelming majority of Palestinian Muslims in specific are Sunnis, they have very openly said, they are also, mushrik, they worship graves, stuff like that. And then with Iran, I mean, they're majority Shia. So to me, would you say then that their ideology today is translating to this idea that even if thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands are dying in Gaza, or thousands are dying in Iran with the current war, that's not our problem because they're outside of Islam? Is that how they believe things to be?
Yeah, not only are they outside of Islam, and therefore Muslims shouldn't support them when they're being attacked, but in fact, we have to help the attackers. Like we have to be on the side of the attackers, the Israel and the United States, because they're Jews and Christians. Therefore, they're people of the book, and they're closer to us, the true Muslims, than these mushriks, than the Palestinians who are grave worshippers. Like that's what the state, like you had all this. The Wahhabi network came out after October 7th, like literally on October 7th and October 8th. And they said, yeah, we should not be supporting the Palestinian resistance. We should not be supporting the Palestinians because they are grave worshippers. They are grave worshippers, and they are polytheists. And therefore, they deserve whatever they get because they don't have the correct aqidah. They don't have the correct creed. And therefore the any kind of plight, any kind of genocide that they are facing, that they're suffering from, they deserve it. That's the punishment of Allah for them having the wrong creed. That online, and I covered this a lot, and at the time, and I continue to cover it because it's so shocking. Like it's so shocking that you have Muslims, who are attacking or enabling and justifying genocide, genocide of other Muslims. And this is not an isolated thing. This is a repeated pattern with Wahhabis. They did the same thing with the invasions of Iraq in the first and second Gulf War. The top clerics, the top Wahhabi clerics said that Iraq is led by Saddam Hussein, who is a Ba'athist, atheist. He's not Muslim. And therefore, Iraq as a country is not a Muslim country. They're atheists. And therefore, we actually can support the US invasion, and we can open up our land, our territory, to establish military bases that will then be used to attack the atheists in Iraq. Anytime Muslims want to resist Zionism, Western imperialism, European imperialism, the Wahhabis are there to declare that group, that resistance group, to be non-Muslim, to declare them as non-Muslim. And so this is like like a bug, like some kind of sabotage device within the Ummah, within the Muslim populations that will, like a virus, like a cancer that is attacking Muslims from the inside. This is like a level of betrayal that we see over and over and over again. Now they're focusing on Shia because of the Iran issue, but their main problem has always been with other Sunnis.
And it's interesting, looking at populations of a lot of these Arab countries, a lot, mainly, the Persian Gulf countries. If you were to ask, most of them, I would say the people who live there, they would largely, from what I've seen, say we support Palestinians, we, are pro-Palestine. But it seems as though that never translates into, well, then we must stand against those who are perpetrating these atrocities against them. Same with Iran. It seems as though there's this theme of we have thoughts and prayers for other, Muslims, but there's no such thing as we're willing to stand up and stand against our governments who are actively facilitating what's going on. It was laughable to me with a lot of influencers in Dubai, for example, with the recent Iran war. They were suddenly flooding social media with, we are not scared because our leaders are protecting us and stuff like that. So now it's almost not just we're against what's happening to the oppressed, but it's, oh, we're also behind our leaders despite knowing exactly what they're doing and who they're in bed with. So do you think that awakening is ever bound to happen in the Muslim world? Or is it just, just sadly something that's the reality that's never going to change?
Sometimes I'm hopeful on some days, otherwise I'm more pessimistic. I think that there is, there's a range, first of all, of perspectives that we should understand. Because, yeah, there are some Wahhabis, like Wahhabis have gradations and subcategories. So you have Wahhabis initially that I mentioned, they're calling the Palestinians grave worshippers, completely anti-Palestinian resistance. Then there's the segment of Wahhabis that are actually pro-Palestinian resistance. They're pro-Palestinian resistance, but for some reason they think that Iran is like the biggest enemy. Iran is like the biggest enemy, and we should hope that Iran is destroyed. And these are Wahhabis and sectarian slash Wahhabis that are found in different Muslim countries, Arab countries, in different proportions. But you see that, and the contradiction that I pointed out with this segment of Wahhabis is that, okay, you are in favor of the Palestinian resistance, you honor the Palestinian resistance, you are, according to your lip service, supporting their cause. However, the Palestinian resistance, the leaders of the Palestinian resistance, say very explicitly that Muslims need to unite across sectarian lines, Sunni and Shia, and specifically with Iran, because Iran is assisting us. Our resistance, our operation against Zionist genocide and occupation is not possible without Iranian support. They have historically supported us. So our dream, our wish is that the Sunni countries and the Gulf countries and all of the Muslim nations will come together and form a pan-Islamic bloc to unite and then be able to fight back against Israel, US imperialism, and end the killing, end the genocide, end the suffering. Have we not seen enough? Have we not seen enough Muslims dying, Muslim children starving? Have we not seen enough? Just in the past 20 years, since the war on terror after 9/11, almost 5 million Muslims have been killed because of this war on terror. Okay, they're the terrorists who have killed 5 million Muslims, and another 38 million Muslims have been displaced, have been made refugees. These aren't Muslim figures. These aren't figures that I'm making up. This is according to Brown University, Watson Institute, Cost of War Project. Go right now and look at the figures. Okay, nearly 5 million. And that's not even counting the Gaza genocide of over 600,000 in less than 2 years, massacred by the Zionist entity. So isn't it enough? This is what the Palestinian resistance was saying, okay, for 2 years before even their leaders were martyred and killed. And then you claim to support, you as a Wahhabi or Salafi Muslim, you claim to support the Palestinian resistance, but then you take the opposite position that no, there can never be any pan-Islamic unity, there can never be any collaboration and alliance with Iran, that can never happen. So in what sense do you respect the Palestinian resistance? In what sense are you their supporters? Because it seems from my perspective that all you can do is sit back from the comfort of your couch or wherever you are, stinking up the couch and spewing this hatred, spewing this sectarian, which only perpetuates the same kind of suffering, the same kind of genocide of Muslims, instead of being the solution. Instead of being solution, creating a kind of popular support, an overwhelming popular support for pan-Islamic unity that would be sufficient to pressure many of these governments to either unite and ally with Iran, or at least be hesitant to continue to facilitate U.S. imperialism with these bases, with this economic surplus that you're flooding, like literally writing billion-dollar checks trillion-dollar checks for Donald Trump, gifting him, like giving him gifts as he commits like a genocide, as he participates in the genocide of your Muslim brothers, at least they would be a little bit more hesitant about that. But because of Wahhabism, because of this cancerous sectarianism, they don't feel any shame to do this kind of treachery with the enemy, with these genocidal forces at the expense of the Palestinians. They don't feel that. They don't feel that pressure. It's because of Wahhabism. It's because of you Wahhabis. So this is very damaging and frustrating.
Absolutely. And kind of in closing, I wonder what you think about whether the current, dynamic, the war that's ongoing with Iran is going to change any of this. Because one thing we have seen is Iran has obviously targeted US military and, just assets in general throughout the region. Not to say that all of them have been obliterated, but many of them have. Many of them have sustained damage to a point where they're no longer operational. That's been one of the reasons they have targeted these countries, not to target their people, but to target the very real US presence in those countries that is threatening not just Iran, but many others in the region as well. Do you think that this war will anyway kind of reshape the dynamics that we're seeing and potentially see the either weakening or dismantling of just the stronghold that Wahhabism, but also this kind of lip service that many of these countries and the strong loyalty they have to the West? Do we ever see that changing?
Yeah, I think that the Iran war has already completely changed the Middle East, the course of history for the Middle East or West Asia. And it's because this was a massive blunder on the part of the United States to think that they would be able to bring Iran to its knees, get Iran to actually surrender and play ball with Israel and the United States, get regime change. This is what the U.S. anticipated. The U.S. anticipated that this was going to be a walk in the park, and they're really influenced by Syria and what happened in Syria with Jolani, Ahmed Shara, and they saw that. They said, "Look how easy it is! Look how easy it is if you really once the main leader, the main figurehead, has been weakened for whatever reason. With Assad, it was economically Bashar al-Assad. He had been greatly weakened, and then you have a lot of popular dissatisfaction, and you can have an oppositional force, like literally, like from Idlib, make a march to Damascus, and it'll be pretty much unopposed. And any kind of military that you have, this was in November and December of 2024. Any type of military that Bashar al-Assad has, they like folded, they abandoned their post because they're just demoralized. They were just suffering economically. Like some of these soldiers were only being paid like a couple of dollars a day, and they don't have any kind of commitment to Bashar al-Assad. They're just going to fold. So just literally fund the opposition to just roll right in and take over. And that's how easy it is. That's what we're going to do with Iran. And to guarantee its success, we're just going to take him out. We're going to take out Khamenei. We're going to decapitate. And it's going to be even easier. It's going to be even more of a cakewalk. We just have to fund some opposition groups. Maybe it's going to be the Kurds. Maybe it's going to be some of these monarchists, some of these Pahlavists. And we're going to fund. We're already able to get them some weapons. And it's going to be a cakewalk. Iran is going to be done. That was the calculation in Donald Trump's head. Instead, what we see is that Iran has been resilient. They have actually rallied around the Islamic Republic, the IRGC, and the governmental forces there. They have rallied around that. Like the support is at the peak level, like maybe since 1979, maybe since the original revolution. Anyway, what has happened is that all of these forward bases in the Gulf have been attacked. They've been rendered inoperable. The U.S. has removed its assets from these bases, actually, in Qatar, in Saudi, in UAE, in Bahrain, because they had loss of interceptors. Their interceptors were depleted in the initial few days. And ever since, Iran has been, with impunity, able to send drones, their Shahed drones, to strike all of these bases and render them inoperable. And they've been evacuated. So this is a massive shift in power in the Middle East, because the U.S. bases in the Middle East, that's the ability of the U.S. to power project throughout the Middle East and kill Muslims, like do their imperial project. over these Muslim countries, Muslim populations. That's how they were able to attack Libya and turn that country upside down. Syria, any country that they want to attack, Iraq, obviously, in the early 2000s, they're able to do because of these bases. And Muslims need to recognize like what a huge betrayal it is to have these bases at the heart of the Muslim world, miles from Mecca and Medina. You have these bases so that whenever the US and Israel want to keep a Muslim government in check or a Muslim population in check, it's very easy for them to take the fighter jets in the air and start dropping bombs. This is an already it's been an economic disaster, and this is what the US can't resist. Like, this is the solution that the US doesn't have, that they don't have the answer to reestablish this. So yeah, the situation has become so dire and so desperate. The Arab countries have realized now that the US is not going to be there to protect them. The US bases that were there, like the bargain that these Gulf states were getting, is that, okay, fine, we have you on our territory, you're going to be able to protect us so we can remain in power. Like, these monarchies, these corrupt monarchies, we can just remain in power indefinitely because you're our bodyguard. And guess what? The bodyguard has been knocked out and the bodyguard has like run away. So they're caught with their pants down, basically. So yeah, I'm hopeful. I don't think that this generation, like those who are over 30 years old in some of these countries, they will learn. Like, unfortunately, people are very stubborn. But the next generation, like Generation Z, they're going to learn these lessons well and recognize like how things are actually done in the world, and hopefully we'll see a brighter future for Muslims everywhere.
Yeah, and just one last question, because I was thinking about this as you were speaking, but what do you think it is about Iran? Because you were mentioning Syria. We have this example in many countries, but the U.S. essentially deciding to topple a government. They're sure that because of the pressures, the sanctions, and all of that, their government officials are going to fold, their military is going to fold, and it's going to create the perfect conditions for us to just walk in and do what we need to do. We saw that with Venezuela, we saw it with Syria, all recent examples. And like you mentioned, I think the calculation with Iran was that this would also be quick. But my question is, what is different about Iran? Because Iran has also been under immense amounts of sanctions. People have been living in very difficult situations. It's been vilified on all fronts from the US and Israel, but also from the Muslim countries in the region, as we just discussed in length. What's kept Iran standing, in your opinion?
Over the past 2 years, I've been reflecting on this, especially. And full disclosure, like, I'm Iranian, so both of my parents are from Iran. I'm Sunni, like I became a Sunni when I was in high school. But reflecting on Iran, I think Iran really deserves a lot of credit because, obviously, I want to say that some people will claim that, oh, see, Shia are the only ones who are resisting, and that's not historically accurate, because you had Sunnis even today. The Palestinians are Sunni; they're resisting. They are suffering the most, and they maintain their resistance to Zionism and U.S. imperialism. And even historically, even before that, you had many Sunni countries. The initial countries that really fought back against Israel, the establishment of this entity, were the Sunni Arab countries, with Egypt and Syria, for example, even Jordan. So yeah, so I don't want to make it like a sectarian answer, but I think that credit is due to Iran because they have suffered a lot. Like, they could have made a deal. Like, they could have really followed suit with any of these other, quote unquote Sunni countries. I say quote unquote Sunni because their leadership are not acting according to Sunni Islamic principles, even though the populations are Sunni. But these Sunni countries, they made a deal. They made a deal, and they threw their own brethren under the bus in the worst way possible. And Iran could have also made that deal. And I'm not saying that, I'm not idealistic about the Iranian government. I'm not a propagandist for the Iranian government, but any fair-minded, objective person, even non-Muslims, are saying this, that it's very admirable in this world in which we live, where everyone is pragmatic, everyone is making a deal, everyone is looking out for number one, meaning themselves. Iran is is saying no, is taking a stand at great cost, at great existential cost to themselves. And we see the result. Like, we see what Iran is going through now. Overall, like, the most important thing, the message that I have as a Sunni Muslim, is that the future of Muslims, the future of the Ummah, really depends on Iran being able to withstand this aggression from these states. Iran, the future of the Ummah, because if Iran falls, if Iran is destroyed by the US and the Zionist entity, then that will really be allow Israel to create a hegemony in the Middle East, and they will become a superpower. Israel will become a superpower, and we've already seen what Israel, being a small 10 million population, can do when they're just the size of New Jersey. But they clearly have ambitions to not only expand their territory to greater Israel, but also to be a superpower, to dominate the world. And this is coming from their religion. This is coming from Jewish eschatology and their belief in establishing the third temple and the coming of their Messiah. And they want to be, whether they're religious Jews or they're secular Jews, they want Israel to be a world superpower. And the final obstacle that they have, the final hurdle in their own minds, is toppling Iran. So this will have disastrous consequences for Muslims as far away as Morocco to Indonesia and everywhere in between. Muslims are going to suffer if Israel is successful in this goal. So every Muslim, any Muslim who doesn't support Iran and doesn't want Iran to come out on top, or is neutral, like, they're traitors, basically. They're traitors to not me or you, but they're traitors to their own children. They're traitors to their own people, Muslim people. You're traitors to the future of your grandchildren, who are going to then suffer the consequences of Israel as a superpower. And we've seen what they think about Muslims, what they're willing to do to Muslim children, literally starve them to death and torture them and mutilate them. That's what this superpower, if it comes to pass, will do to Muslims, and will attempt to erase Islam off of the face of the globe. So I think we have to be very clear about the stakes, what is really involved here, and to wake up. Like, wake up. What are we doing? We're still having this kind of bickering and sectarian debates. Like, it's just feeding exactly into the plans of the enemy.
Absolutely. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for joining us on TMJ today. It was wonderful to have you. Thanks.
Thank you.
If you like what you see here on TMJ News, don't forget to like and share and subscribe to our channel for more interviews. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the TMJ Insider, for access to all our reporting, articles, interviews, and a special weekly take from our editor-in-chief. TMJ News is an independent, grassroots media outlet, and you can find ways to support us, as well as all the links to our resources in the caption below. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope to see you next time.